Hi, Jude. I see your name. I'm not hearing you at all, though.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yay.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's just see if I can get some video on here too, because now you've got video.
I do.
There we go. Now there's both of us. How do you like that?
Yay. So perfect.
All
So
right. Just
looking
don't
at
want to be on here alone. I feel really close though.
you feel what?
Close, like my head is really close.
Yeah.
How can I change that?
Well, yay! Well, mine's kind of close. I'm kind of
Anyway,
close.
I'll sit in the back of the room.
No,
Okay.
no problem. So I went through the stuff, and I don't know, and I probably should have mentioned to the guys that you and I were going to talk anyway. But anyway, it's a work session, and we're not making any final decisions. So anything that we do, we'll document and send it back to them.
Okay. Sounds good.
So that's the thought. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So life is getting a little bit back to normal. Things were crazy, but
Yeah.
now they're getting back to normal. So all good.
Yes.
So let me bring up, I can share my screen.
Good.
Um,
Look everything over. So
okay. So, and what I'm going to do that I didn't do yet is I'm going to take, if I can, um, I'm going to take all of what they said.
well, you know what I did is I printed out what they said, and
Right.
we could look at what they were referring to because they just gave us notes without inserting them into the actual document.
Right. And that's what I did, but when, this afternoon is
Okay.
I did insert them in the document.
Okay.
So I'm just going to put the side by side document up. And we had already started to, we already started to work on that. So as soon as I get it all up, I'll share my screen.
Okay.
And there we go. I'll share it in just a moment. There we go. And we'll just go through each thing.
Okay.
And, but I wish what I was hoping for though, and my phone is going nuts, but that's okay. So I'll share my screen. There we go. So I have the latest copy of the document and I have the memorandum. But what's not there is I wish there were some way to put this in edit mode, or I thought I could at least copy paste stuff and I can't grab anything.
So what we want to do though is we want to edit on the one on the right, right?
Well, we do, but my thought was that I would be able to also respond to each thing to back to the planning board and say, what did we do with it?
Got you.
And so it's hard to respond if I can't write
Yeah.
anything there. But
Okay.
anyway, and I'm kind of eating dinner while we're going here, but
Okay.
it is what it is.
It is what it is. We can always make it a little later too. It doesn't have to be 6:30, you know.
Well, that's okay. We'll work our way through.
Okay.
Um, so we'd already done some of this.
We did?
Well, we got to the first one or two, and then it was after a long discussion on other topics, and I was done, you were done, and
Yeah.
Connor wanted to keep going, and I said, no, we're not doing this. We'll come back when we're fresh.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
feel a lot fresher now.
Good.
So we had done the first thing. They liked adding the word mountain or mountainous, and we had added the words and mountainous, but I'm okay just saying scenic mountainous, just what they asked for.
I think that's good. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm okay. So I've done that. They didn't like, and let me look at because I've got my marked up copy here. Okay.
Special permit requirements.
So I got my marked up copy and I have a marked up copy of the law. So what they didn't like, sorry, I'm coming around here. They didn't like at or, they just want at. And we had said at an elevation greater than, yeah, at 1,200 feet or, at or greater than. So we had said at or greater than, and we took out one of those So you can't see it because it's a deletion and so it's gone. So we took out one, but then I noticed that they also had it down here. They say at or above an elevation of 1,200 feet. So we should therefore take out the at or, because they didn't like the at or, and just say above. They thought it'd be confusing to say at or rather than just above an elevation. So if you're,
But it is at 1,200 feet or above. 1,200
well,
feet is I mean, I guess if it's 1,201, it's not a big deal, but it is
yeah,
at,
yeah. Well, I'll add it back in, but then we'll just have to say that we just chose to not incorporate that.
They said,
I mean, I agree with you that it's fine, but we just won't have incorporated it.
but it just says proposed language is problematic for legal interpretations. Why?
Well, okay, well, that's okay. I'll just say, um, did not, we did not adopt, did,
No, what is the original language?
well, the original language,
Was
and that's the value of the side to side.
at an elevation greater than 1,200 feet. So I guess we should just say at an elevation greater than 1,200 feet. And we'll
Okay,
just go with that. I mean, if they were concerned, they're the ones who have to
right,
implement this. So we'll just say at an, I always thought it
yeah.
was 1,200 feet or above, but if it's 1,200
Yeah,
feet,
but this is, yeah, the original is at an elevation greater than 1,200 feet. Okay, so at an elevation greater than 1,200 feet, and then I'll take that out down here as well to make it consistent.
I think that's good.
Okay, at an elevation of 1,200 feet. Okay, so we've adopted both.
That one is at an elevation greater, and this one is just at an elevation of 1,200 feet.
Oh, at an elevation greater than. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, there you go. Thank you.
So you're gonna take off the of?
Greater than, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then
So
just make
then
sure.
we just incorporated what they wanted.
Okay, so we're good. And
So we took that suggestion.
yeah, so we took that suggestion and it's okay. Let me just reread to make sure. At an elevation greater than 1,200 feet. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we did that. We need the baseline photograph. Well, that's something we can just tell the town board because that's not something that we can do here. That's not a law change. That's just saying the town ought to do that. So my answer to the planning board is that we'll let the town board know that that's the recommendation.
Right.
So I think one was pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
So two,
Make sure we've got.
yeah, we're in complete agreement. Yep, sounds good. And then they say after the last paragraph, let people know if they disagree with the determination of elevation, they can do something about it. So they're talking about, let me go back to my marked up copy to make sure I'm good there. So they're talking about the end of B before C. So what they're saying is, because we added a paragraph, we added several paragraphs. The town of Woodstock shall create and maintain a computerized list of properties provided to the assessor. Well, this is interesting because to ensure compliance with zoning regulation pertaining by property owners, the town will create and maintain. It doesn't say actually who in the town, but anyway, the town will create it, give it to the assessor. The assessor will know when a property is transferred, consult the list, and then notify the zoning enforcement officer, and then the zoning enforcement officer will let the new property owner know via certified mail they're in the district. And then it comes down to say, whenever an application for a building permit is submitted by the property owner, the ZEO or planning board will determine if the property is within or partly within the scenic overlay district and remind the applicant they're required to follow the regulations in the zoning law. So, so they're saying at the end of the section, they're saying add these words, if the property owner.
I don't think that's necessary.
You don't think it's necessary?
I don't, no. I think if somebody has a disagreement, they'll disagree, and then the CEO will say, then show me, right?
Well, yeah, that's one option. But then we're telling the planning board, we're not gonna do what they recommended. They're recommending a sentence go in here.
No, we don't have to do what they say. I just think that, if the property owner disagrees with the determination, they are, I just.
Well, here's the wording.
Mhm.
If the property owner disagrees with determination of elevation, they are encouraged to get their own surveyor and have elevation accurately determined by a professional.
Well, that's suggesting that it's not accurate when it's determined by the town. It's so easy to determine elevation. I mean, it's on your phone, for God's sake. You have an altimeter on your phone.
Right.
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, if somebody disagrees, then they'll go to the building department and say, I'll disagree. And then the CEO says, show me. I don't know that we need to have this in the law. I mean, you could disagree with anything that's
Mhm.
in the law, your setbacks, your elevation,
Right.
I think it's sort of assumed that if you disagree, there's something you can do.
Mhm.
Don't you agree?
Okay. I've got my mouth full. I'm still eating.
No, that's okay. I just don't think that there's a lot of things you could disagree with.
Mhm.
We don't put that in every other section, that's all.
Right. Okay, so that's setting a precedent.
I think we'd have to do it with everything.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Um,
So I'm just gonna write on here my little note, not necessary.
okay.
No, it's just, whenever you disagree, you always have that option.
Right, okay.
And then it also, like accurately determined sort of implies that what they did was not accurate.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So we're saying no, because I would have said, this would be the process to add this. If the property owner disagrees with determination of elevation, they're encouraged to get their own surveyor and have elevation accurately determined by a professional. And I would add a phrase and provide supporting elevation documentation to the assessor. So I would have added that, but if we think we're opening a bag of snakes and setting a precedent, we just won't do it.
I just, I think if somebody has an objection, they will pursue it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But like I said, I don't like that accurately, you know,
Mm-hmm.
implying that what's done is not accurate. So,
Right. Mm-hmm.
okay, so that's my take. I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. Okay.
Just
That's okay.
like I said, everything could be done. You can always bring in your survey and you can always bring in documentation saying this isn't correct. Nobody stops you from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
okay.
I'm chewing again.
Okay.
So, okay.
It is dinner time.
It is dinner time, and it was when my now husband got home and said, "Are we going to have dinner?" And I was thinking we'd do it after the meeting, but you never know how long our meetings last. So we
Right.
we quickly cooked it before, and he's already eaten his. But anyway, I'm getting it done.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So in the item K10, and here's one where I off the bat did not really agree, but what what this is saying, and it may be that what I would do is add a couple of words to clarify this. So, and what I would add here, and I'll explain in a minute, unless land is in the scenic overlay, um, and therefore regulated, because I think that what they're saying, if I look at what they're saying, can we clarify the 20 cords of wood? And my point is, we're saying that if you're in the scenic overlay, this exclusion doesn't apply to you. If you're in the scenic overlay, you don't get to harvest Christmas trees. You don't get to have 12 cords of wood a year. You don't get to do any of this. So this paragraph, this item K10, is not the purview of us addressing scenic overlay, because this exclusion only happens if you're not in the scenic overlay, because if you're in the scenic overlay, you got to follow the law that we're proposing.
Right.
So I just added a few words to clarify, to make it more clear that if you're in the scenic overlay, you're regulated by 260-66. Otherwise, you're excluded. But if you're in the scenic overlay, you're only excluded unless you're in the scenic overlay. If you're in the scenic overlay, you're regulated by that. So I just added a few more words to better explain what we're trying to say here.
Should it be land in the scenic overlay that is regulated by 260-66?
Well, if land's in the scenic overlay, it is therefore regulated by 260-66. So say again what you were thinking.
Just thinking about changing that sentence.
Okay, that's okay.
Christmas trees. Clearing of land for rights of ways. I'm missing this. Excluded from the special use permit shall be the harvesting of Christmas trees. Okay, I think that's good. Unless land is in the scenic overlay and therefore regulated by 266, excluded from special use permit shall be the, I see. Okay, unless land is, I'm just trying to see if the wording is clear. Unless land is in the
Okay.
therefore regulated by 266.
Well, I think it wasn't clear before, which is why I think why they made their comment. So
I
yeah,
got-
the goal is to have it be clear. So I'm happy to make it more clear.
Right. I'm trying to understand 260-63. Can you please clarify 20 cords of wood? We think you can add an amount based on acreage within a time frame. Is that what their comment is though? Because they're talking about,
Their comment is saying, their comment is about the 20 cords per year.
yeah,
They're commenting to say, can you be more clear about what you mean by 20 cords per year? And my point is, we don't mean anything about 20 cords per year because that's not the part of the law we're changing.
right, gotcha.
We didn't make a change of that. We're just saying, we're just making it clear that what they exclude, when they say you don't need a special use permit to harvest Christmas trees, clearing of land for right of way, et
Right,
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When they're saying you don't need to have a special use permit and to get 20 cords per year, when they're saying you don't need to do this, they're not talking about the scenic overlay.
right.
The scenic overlay now has this new standard that's stricter. So the point being that if you're in the scenic overlay, these exclusions don't apply to you.
You, right. Um. Okay, okay, I guess that's clear, unless land is in the scenic overlay and therefore regulated by 260-66. Excluded from, okay, I think it's all right. I'm a little,
It's hard to make it crystal clear.
well,
I
unless you.
I think it's better than it was.
I think it is too, unless you make a, unless you make another sentence, you know what I mean?
Right, okay.
I mean, I just want it to be completely clear and just say,
So why don't I say, well, let me try something else
okay,
and say, making it two sentences might be more clear.
yeah,
Land in the scenic overlay. Land in the scenic overlay is regulated, is regulated by the, otherwise, other land, otherwise, these are exclusions. Oops.
I like that the land of the scenic overlay is regulated by 260-66. Can we just say lands not in the scenic overlay are excluded from the special, just repeat?
Hang on, I'm trying to.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, I'm just trying to make it crystal clear. Lands not in the scenic overlay are excluded from the special permit requirement. What does it say? Excluded from,
but I want to make sure that they know that land in the scenic overlay is regulated. So selling the land in the scenic overlay is regulated by this.
yes,
I just changed the sentence to say land not in the scenic overlay.
yes. Are excluded from the following SUP requirements.
Let me just, has these exclusions,
Okay.
and then we just have to make this right here,
Okay, so maybe requirements with an S.
especially using. Well, okay, yeah, all right, we'll add an S.
I'm gonna see if it goes to regulars. Land not in the scenic overlay has these exclusions from special use permit requirements. Okay. I think that keeps what was there, right? Except it makes it clear about the special use permits for. Right. I think that's good. Land not in the
Okay.
overlay has.
I need to make some more of it red, but I need two hands to do that, just a.
Land in the
Mm.
scenic overlay is regulated.
I'm on
by-
my last bite of food.
Oh, good. I hope
Mhm.
it was delicious. Land not in
It was awesome.
the-
Mhm.
Okay. Land is scenic overlay is regulated by 262. Land not in scenic overlay is exclusion. Special requirement.
So that should be more clear than it was.
I think it was, listen, we could diddle around with the language. I could say net land, just to keep it similar to what was there. Land not in the scenic overlay is excluded from these special permit requirements. You know what I mean?
Okay, sure. It is
So we have excluded the same,
the same wording,
yeah, because we got regulated and excluded.
right?
All right, there we go. From the or from the following,
Whoop-
whatever you want to do.
Whoops, I'm hitting the wrong key here. Just a second here. Is excluded from
The following or these? The following special use permit
special.
requirements or,
This, I mean, they just see the special use permit, so I could even take out the word requirements. And it reads a little more like it did.
yes, yes. Okay, land not in the scenic overlay is excluded from the special use permit. That doesn't even make sense, though, does it? All right.
I can add the word requirements back in again if you like it better that way.
Well, I think it makes sense. Land not in the scenic overlay
Okay.
excluded from the requirements of a special permit requirements. Either way, yeah. Okay. But it should probably say these or the following. Because it's not excluded from all special use permit requirements. You have to be so specific.
Oh, yeah, you're right about that. Land
Mhm.
not in the is excluded from these. Yep.
Okay, the harvesting Christmas trees, clearing. Yeah, this makes more sense. Land in the scenic was regulated by 260-66. Land not in the scenic overlay is excluded from. Okay, I think that's good.
Okay. So
Right.
the answer is gonna be, we updated wording, because again, what they wanted to know, let me just make my notes here. So what they wanted us to do is clarify 20 quarts per year, how many acres, 20 quarts per year based on how many, and my answer is, that's not really our purview. Our only point of touching this paragraph is to say, if you're in the scenic overlay, you don't get these exclusions, go look over to 26066 if you're in the scenic overlay. So
Right.
I'm not trying to touch this 20 quarts per year because that wasn't really our purview as part of the scenic overlay to address that, because if you're in the scenic overlay, you can't do it anyway.
Right.
So that's my answer to them about,
Well, if they want to look at that, then they should make a suggestion about that. I think you're right. It's not
yeah, because it's not in the purview, because we're focused on
it's
overlay.
not about scenic overlay,
It's
right?
not about scenic overlay.
Yep.
So, yeah, okay. So I say we updated the wording to be more clear. To be more, just make this aside, clear, not about scenic overlay. Yeah, okay. All right, so I think that's the answer to number 3. So number 4, now I'm flipping my page over. So now they're actually in the standards. Let me
Mhm.
just do it. I think it's already saved. So they like things that we added, so that's a good thing. So item D, section A1D. So let me just go down to A1D. And I'm just kind of looking here, and before I go, I'm just gonna yeah, I'm making it so that you can see on each side what was reworded. Okay. So I'm going down here, A1D. Now, the thing about D, so we had added the words and the limitation or prohibition, and I think that they found it confusing. The old terminology, because both of it says the prohibition of development along and projecting above ridge lines. The old and the new says that. The old one said, and discouragement of development, where we had thought this wording was better, the limitation or prohibition, because I think we thought discouragement wasn't really clear enough. However, they didn't seem to like confusing language, inconspicuous or prohibition of development. So their question was inconspicuous or prohibition of development. Confusing language leaves possibility of open-ended proposals for development. Inconspicuous as possible. Let me just read here. So prohibition of development and projecting limitations. Inconspicuous as possible within ridgelines and limitations on prominent locations. We recommend dividing the sentence, the long sentences follows at lower altitudes. Well, dividing the long sentence is fine. So that, if we were to do that, and let me just go back.
Mhm.
I've got it in my notes, and I already kind of figured out in my notes how to do it. So it's pretty easy to say, we can do this and say these restrictions preserve. So this is kind of the change here, make it red. So the second thing that they said was divide the long sentence. I think we can do that pretty easily, like I just did.
Right. Yep, I agree.
And Lawrence, these restrictions to preserve trends. But what I'm not quite sure what to do with is when it says confusing language leaves possibility of open-ended proposals for development, inconspicuous as possible within ridge lines and limitations on prominent locations. So maybe they're recommending these words instead. So prohibition along ridge lines, limitation, So I guess I'm not quite sure what the answer is here of how to incorporate what they're saying.
Inconspicuous as possible.
And let me just move this.
But doesn't it already say that?
So okay. So the prohibition of development along and projection above ridge lines and the limitation or prohibition of development at other visually prominent locations. So development is as visually inconspicuous as possible when seen from a distance and from lower altitudes. So the only thing I am thinking that we could do, because I'm not quite sure how to solve what they don't like, we could take the words limitation or prohibition and put the word discouragement back in again. I don't know if they like discouragement better, but they don't seem to like limitation or prohibition. And I'm not quite sure.
We've already got prohibition up there, the prohibition of development along or projecting.
Well, that was there before, so that's black
Um,
on both sides. So that was there all along. The
Okay,
prohibition, and that seems like they don't have a confusion about that.
right.
Prohibition of development along or projecting above ridge lines. I think the confusion was the way we've worded this and the limitation or prohibition of development. And I'm not sure what wording would be more clear.
And see, I think that prohibition for the ridgelines should remain.
Well,
Um,
and I think that they're not arguing that. I mean, that was there before and it's there
they
too.
do say inconspicuous as possible within ridgelines.
Mhm.
So they're saying, and the limitation of development of visually obvious, development is as visually inconspicuous as possible. Conspicuous.
But we talked before about other visually prominent locations. So that was in there from before also.
Yeah, yes. So,
Well, wait, maybe we just say and restrict development. I wonder whether, I mean, because we used to say discouragement of development. We tried to make it better by saying limitation or prohibition. But what if we were to say, and I'm just going to strike this
okay,
strike through at the moment, if I can
area.
do a strike through, just for the purpose of our discussion, and restrict. I'm going to put it in red just so we can be kind of looking at it here. Well, hit it again. There we go. So I don't know whether that would be more clear. The prohibition of development at and or projection above ridge lines, which is what it said before, and restrict, instead of saying discouragement, we can just say, maybe just say restrict development at other visually prominent locations so development is as visually inconspicuous as possible. So maybe the word restrict is more clear than either discouragement or limitation or prohibition. Limitation or prohibition, I think they had an issue with.
So the only question I have is, the consistency. We're saying the prohibition of development could just be prohibit development and restrict you know what I'm saying? Either, or and restriction, it's just like the language is so.
Well,
It's respect for natural drainage ways. You know what I'm just saying? Encouragement. It's just like the language is, some of it is respect.
well,
Why does it just say, why does it just say prohibit development along and or projecting above ridge lines and restrict development at other visually prominent locations? I just like the wording is,
well, it is restrict okay? Are you okay if I
yes,
put
I'm okay with restrict, but I'm just saying,
okay?
to say restrict, why don't we say prohibit?
What's that? Oh,
Can
well,
Let's go back. Can we go back up and look at A and B just for curiosity to see what that language looks like?
sure.
So it's,
Okay, the proposed development shall include the following measures:
yeah.
minimization, cut and fill activity, effective vegetative restoration, use of building materials, colors, and textures designed to blend with the natural environment, prohibiting highly reflective materials. Then we talked about how, if your windows are this big or that big or whatever.
Mhm.
Respect for natural features, including foliage, drainage, ways, contours, and landforms. And then we want to prohibit development along or projecting above ridge lines. And if there are other visually prominent locations, restrict so development is visually inconspicuous as possible. So I think restrict with the goal as inconspicuous as possible means there may be cases where you could, whereas if you're doing it on a ridge line,
You just prohibit
you
it.
want to prohibit that. But
Right,
we're saying you have a little more latitude.
right.
So restrict, I think helps.
I think restrict is good. The only question I have is instead of, I mean, we could go through and mess with the whole language, but why wouldn't it just be, instead of the prohibition, just prohibit? But I don't want to, we'd have to go through and figure all this out. Just consistency. I mean, so it's the prohibition of development along and projecting above ridge lines and the restriction of development. You know what I mean? It's just so funny the way.
I see what you're saying. So, okay, the proposed development shall include the following measures: the prohibition and so I see what you're saying. It would be consistent.
Go back up for a second. Go back up and let me
Yeah,
just.
hang on. Let me just put this in here and then I'll go
I
back
think
up.
I like restrict better than the restriction. I actually like restrict better. It's more.
Okay, well, let's just go back and read the lead in. Because the lead in is this: the proposed development shall include the following measures.
So why wouldn't it just say minimize cut and fill? Respect natural features. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh. The following measure, the minimum, the use. Well, they say yeah,
I
they're,
see it. That's
yeah, I
fine.
mean, we're kind of changing a lot of stuff
Okay, we
that
don't
they
have
didn't ask
to.
us to change, so
Okay.
I kind of hesitate to do that. Yeah, so it's following features. The minimization, the use, respect for natural features,
Hmm.
the prohibition.
It's all right. And the restriction. Nah.
Yeah, and
Well,
yeah, although they kind of switched to respect, but then they
I
go back
know.
to the encouragement, the shielding of.
I know. Yeah, okay. I mean, we could go through and change, should be encouraged natural, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
it's fine. It's all done that way. We'll stick with it.
Okay,
Or
so
the-
the prohibition of development along, let me just reread. The
Mhm.
prohibition of development along and projection above ridge lines and the restriction of development so that development is visually inconspicuous as possible when seen from a distance and low altitude. These restrictions preserve tree lines, forest, these measures. Should I call it these measures? Because one's a restriction, one's a prohibition.
Yeah, that sure sounds good.
Yeah, these measures. Okay, so these measures preserve tree lines, forest. Okay, so we've addressed this item. Okay, so in G,
Mhm.
my thought in G, and let me flip over to it in my hard copy here. So what they're saying, and let me come down here. Okay. So it's way down in the middle, I think. So I think it would be here because what they're saying, what she's saying is who determines non-essential? We assume the ZEO should this be specified. So we could, so what I thought was adding something here, and I'll just add it and see what you think. Consult the sir if you are unsure if your tree Okay, so, so they said who determine, I mean, their question was who determines non-essential, we assume the ZEO. So,
Right. I can't see what you wrote, by the way.
what was that?
I can't see what you wrote. Can you scroll up or down?
Oh, in
No.
red, you can't see
Say
what I
it
wrote,
how you say it.
so you can't see it?
No, what the last line I see is that I can't see what you added. There you go. Thank you.
Oh, okay, oh, interesting, huh?
You have a different screen? Hmm.
No, it's very odd. I mean, I'm showing you everything I have and it's right. So I don't know, but that's all right. You can see it now, so that's good. So
Okay.
that's kind of what I thought to, because they're saying who determines not essential, we assume the ZEO. So I
Mhm.
put in there that if they have a question about whether or not their tree cutting plan is not essential, they should consult the zoning enforcement officer. So that was how I resolved it by adding by mentioning the zoning enforcement officer.
Why don't we just say the zoning enforcement officer is the final arbiter of what's essential or something like that?
Okay. Okay.
You know, something like that, rather than we're not going to ask them if they have a question. We're going to tell
All
them
right. Okay.
who has the answer.
The zoning enforcement officer, um,
Shall be.
w- but I mean, so what are we saying that because we don't want, I mean, they don't want to be bothered every day to say, tell me if this is essential, because people should be able to, for the most part, figure it out because we've given a definition. We've given
Right.
a definition of non-essential, so you'd hope that people could figure it out. And the zoning enforcement officer, she'll be the final arbiter, or she'll, so what are we saying exactly about the zoning enforcement officer?
The zoning enforcement officer shall be the final arbiter of be the final arbiter of essential tree cutting or something like that.
Of,
Of
of,
defines essential tree cutting or what determines
of
essential tree cutting.
determining. Whoops. Okay. The zoning enforcement officer shall be the final arbiter determining, is that the right sentence structure?
Yes, the zoning enforcement officer shall be the final arbiter of uh
Or should, yeah, just get rid of the word of. The zoning enforcement final arbiter
final
to
arbiter, I'm sorry.
determine. How about to determine?
To determine non-essential. Is it non-essential or essential?
Essential versus?
Okay, that's good. Or and essential and non-essential tree cutting, right?
Sure.
Versus is fake.
That's
Okay,
probably clearer.
yep. The zoning enforcement officer shall be the final arbiter to determine essential and non-essential.
Or to identify? Do we want to say to determine, or identify is another word?
I know, the zoning enforcement officer. Aren't you an arbiter of, not an arbiter to? Shouldn't it just be final arbiter of essential and non-essential, not to take away determiner, determine? The
Final
zoning
arbiter
enforcement
of.
officer shall be the final arbiter of essential and non-essential tree cutting. I think that's the proper language.
Okay,
I think it is. Final arbiter of essential.
yeah,
I
sure.
think that's it. He's the one who's gonna decide.
Well,
Okay.
that's, I mean, it sounds good to me. Okay, so that sounds good.
Okay.
Um, okay, so, so we're good there. So the next thing, so we're over here at this other thing. Now, my point of confusion on this is the whole number H. And I had talked to Judy Kerman, and I had talked to, I think it was Judy and Butch and Melissa. And
Mhm.
I thought that I had talked with all three of them, and they all agreed with this language. But
Mhm.
now when this is going to the planning board, the board as a body does not agree with the language. And the whole point of this was to say, how does somebody maintain, you know, so I buy this piece of property and the view's already there, right? So
Mhm.
say we have this drone set of photographs and you can see that there's a certain view someplace, and I built my house there and I didn't take down trees, but I'm seeing a view. So, or I buy a property. So say I buy a property, right? I buy a property and it's got a view. Well, so like the example I've used before is, so I have a maple tree and it drops like 1,000 seeds, or even an oak tree will drop, you know, acorns. So say you have these things dropped in your yard, and when you bought the house, the property, you had a view, but then some oak tree dropped an acorn in your yard, and next thing you know, you got an oak tree blocking your view. So you can't maintain the same view that you had when you bought the property. So the idea was and that's part of why this got sent back for being reviewed again, is because of feedback from property owners that said, are you telling me I can't maintain what I've got today? So, and the idea was not to tell them they couldn't maintain what they had today, but the other idea was that people said there are also fire recommendations that you ought to have vegetation no closer than so many feet to your structures. So people want to be able to have that, you know, cushion of no trees around to kind of to help preserve their structure in the case of a fire. And they want to be able to maintain what they had when they bought the property. So that was the whole point. And I had talked with Melissa and Judy and Butch, and this wording came out of that, the wording in red over here. But
Mhm.
now they're saying this is absolutely indefensible in court and asking for legal lawsuits. The language and suggestion is extremely problematic and not enforceable. Homeowners' desire to keep clear views has resulted in major damage to the forest canopy and the view shed. Well, if they started out with a clear view, they're just saying they want to keep the view they've already got. And how does keeping a view you have today result in major damage? So that's so the planning board says only trimming for tree health or protection of structures should be permitted if deemed necessary by ZEO or planning board. A certified arborist should be involved. So they're saying, no, we do not approve you maintaining what you've got. You can only trim for tree health or protection of the structures.
Can I see the rest of H? I can only see the part on page 6.
Well, okay, so let me scroll it up. Let me try
Can you
let me try
raise
bringing
up the
this,
whole, erase
let me
the
try
whole?
bringing this up a little bit.
Yep,
Does
there
that
you
help
go.
you see more?
I only still see page 6. Wait, let me just see if oh, it's me.
So tell me how far you see.
You know what it is? It's me because I'm making it bigger so I can read it. It was totally me. Let's see if I can.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, I could see it now. Let me just see. All right, that's what I could, you know, I couldn't do this on my old laptop. Let's just see.
Oh, so while you're doing that, since we are being recorded, I
Yes.
think, are we being recorded? I thought so.
It's interesting that you say that because I'm looking and I don't, do I see
No,
what?
it doesn't look like it is recording. That isn't. Well, that's fine.
It did say it was being recorded at the beginning, but I don't see the recorded button.
No, I don't. Let me see more. Let me click on
Oh, no,
more.
it does say recording. Up at the
Okay.
top.
Oh, yeah, and see, pause or stop recording. So anyway, what I should have mentioned at the beginning is this is a zoning revision committee work session. We do not have a quorum today. And so, but Jude and I are on, and we want to take a first pass in a very transparent way, because we're being recorded, at our thoughts, just the two of us, of how to address the scenic overlay feedback from the planning board. And we will be sharing this with the rest of the zoning revision committee to get their input to our thoughts as a way of getting kind of a start at addressing the planning board input. So we thought it was better for two of us to do it rather than waiting, we're not quite sure when we'll get a quorum together again. So the two of us are getting started on it, so we can start the thought process and then weave in what the others say. We're not sending the thoughts of just the two of us to the town board. We're going to wait until we have some feedback from the other zoning revision committee members of whether they agree. So if we have a quorum agreeing to this feedback, then we'll share it outside. But this is just a work session to get thoughts going. So I should have probably said that at the beginning of the recording, but at least I've said it now. So anyway, so were you able to read all of H?
Yes. Well, basically they're disagreeing. They're saying they don't like the idea. They think the only reason to do it is for tree health, protection of structures, and if it's determined by the planning board and an arborist. So they basically disagree. So I would highlight this and say further discussion. I know there were people that came to you with this.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, that's the planning board says, no, I meant to ask you, have we heard back from the Ulster County Planning Board on this? This was sent quite a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was sent quite a while ago. That's a good question. And I was asking back on the fence law, whether we've heard from Ulster County Planning Board. So
That would have just gone to them. That probably wouldn't come up until their July meeting because they had their meeting the first week in June, and I think this all just went out. It may not have gotten on their calendar for June, but this went to them a long time
a
ago.
long time ago. Well, the
Yeah.
other thing though is Bill had thought, even though I recently sent this to Melissa, Bill thought that Melanie had done it soon after the meeting where the town board agreed it could go. Bill thought Melanie had sent it to both places. So it's possible she sent it to the Ulster County Planning Board in time for them to talk about it at their June meeting. But so I'm just kind of thinking,
Well, the fence one, I would anticipate it's not gonna be heard until the July meeting, just because I think the planning board just got it. Well, it might have made it onto the June meeting. I don't know, but, I don't know how far in advance they have to get things on their calendar before they meet. It's like
oh, right.
first Wednesday of the month. And whenever you mentioned it is when it went, because I had been asking Melissa if she'd gotten it. So, but this one went to the planning board quite a while ago, and I
Right.
would assume the Ulster County Planning Board as well. So we
Well,
might want to follow up and see if they had any comments. But I would just highlight this section and just say this is something we all have to discuss together again, since this is what came back from the planning board. You and I aren't
right.
going to solve it, you know?
Well, and I wonder whether I should ask to go to a planning board meeting to
Sure.
discuss it.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, and then the issue is going to be I wouldn't be able to go until July because I just have a personal thing that I've signed up for the third Thursday of this month. Um,
Well, you know what? June's going to go really fast.
yeah,
Yeah,
they
like
all the
everything
other
else.
months, all the other months have, so I'm sure it will.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so well, so we just need to give this one thought, I guess.
Yep, so I would just highlight it and just, and highlight on their document, well, I guess you can't do, but maybe make a note and highlight this section and say,
Yeah.
planning board, had concerns and we just gotta see what we
Yeah.
can do.
But again, like they say, homeowners' desire to keep clear views has resulted in this. I'm reading this over here.
Mhm.
Homeowners' desire to keep clear views has resulted in major damage to the forest canopy and the view shed. But that was why people, again, I recall talking to Butch and Judy and Melissa, and I thought that my recollection of the conversation is that they thought the SUP that they would have that would give the planning board control because the planning board could set the requirements. When the planning board sets the SUP, they state what the requirements of the SUP are, and by having it be an SUP, they would have some recourse. They could go to the planning board, and the planning board would have total control because they would set the SUP requirements.
Right.
So that made perfect sense. Um, anyway, so
Well,
yes,
I think you're right. I think that might be just further discussion with the planning board because you had that discussion with Judy and Butch and Melissa. So clearly the planning board had
yeah.
had a different take, but I think it might be worth having a discussion with them about it, and then we can
Yeah.
talk about it more too. I understand what you're saying. If there's an SUP that's required for it, it's not going to allow somebody to totally, cut down
Right.
the trees, but,
But then they're saying it's indefensible in court and asking for legal lawsuits.
well, I mean, at some point, there may be certain sections that there might be good reason to consult with an attorney and see before this all goes. You know what I mean? I think, an ounce of prevention, right?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point.
And
So,
I think if there are questions about certain sections and whether or not we have the legal, uh, I don't know what the word I want to use is, standing, I guess, to be
mhm,
able to do this, it might be worth consulting with an attorney. It couldn't cost that much.
right.
It probably could save the town a lot of money in the end. So,
Well, that's a good point. Okay. So we need to discuss further.
yeah, I think, yes, I think that would be good. So everybody is on the same page.
Right. Right. So, okay. All right. So lots to think about there. So we don't have a good answer. Um, okay. So section C1. So
Mhm.
that was the only one where well, we had the other one we just said we're just not going to do it, except that I think they're a little more adamant about this one that we just need to figure out a better answer. Um,
Okay,
so we have basically two more items plus the handbook.
okay.
So section C1, let me go back to section C1. It's coming down here. C1. Okay. So I think that what they're saying, if we add a few words, um, let me just say. So this is what it used to say, over to the right. The following
Mhm.
uses and activities are prohibited. And then it says clear cutting as part of a commercial logging operation, except as provided in 260-63K10. But we changed 260-63K10 to say, no, it's not accept that, because we were back there and saying, no, if you're in the scenic overlay, you got to follow scenic overlay, you don't have that exemption.
Right,
So here's saying these activities are prohibited, clear cutting as part of a commercial logging or operation, except as provided, but we're crossing that out because we're saying, no, we changed 260-63K10 to say, no, if you're in the scenic overlay, you can't be commercial logging. That's what
right.
we changed it to say.
Yes.
So we're changing this around from when it says the fine use and activities are prohibited. We're saying there's no exception anymore, just boom, clear cutting as part of a commercial logging operation is prohibited, period, not accept as anything. So we took out the accept as provided, and then we went on to say some other things. And what they said, we suggest reviving the words to all non-essential tree cutting. So we can do that.
Mhm.
Just do it here. All, if I want to get the same font. There we go. All, I'm just gonna type in just what they say.
Mhm.
Whenever we say non-essential, we put a dash in though, so be consistent. Um, all non-aids. Cutting.
She had include and right, commercial logging. There you go.
Including, and I was gonna put all non-essential tree cutting, including clear cutting and commercial logging operation,
I don't think we
No
need,
exception there.
I don't think we need operation.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so now it's,
Except we have, okay, all non-essential tree cutting, including clear cutting, commercial logging.
yeah. And I'm actually gonna take it, because this is gone, people can see that it's gone
Right.
anyway, so.
Um, well, isn't tree cutting also tree removal? That next, after and all non-essential tree removal?
Well, tree cutting and removal.
Mm,
Well, I say tree cutting. Well, it is possible to cut a tree down without removing it. But anyway, so tree cutting and tree removal can be can be two different things. You can't remove a tree if you haven't cut it, theoretically. But in any event, all non-essential tree cutting.
This is, you can't just change that sentence without looking at the whole paragraph.
Well, you're right about that. Yes. Yeah.
It didn't really help us with their suggestions because they didn't give us the full.
Right. Right.
They should have just gone in and changed the language and showed us what they wanted, and now we're
Yeah.
basically all non-essential tree cutting, including clear cutting and commercial logging. It just that it's an extremely long sentence that I'm having a hard time following.
Well, oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the long sentence here. Yeah, so these activities are prohibited. All non-essential tree cutting, including clear cutting and commercial logging. Well, yeah,
Shouldn't it just be including clear cutting, commercial logging, topping and limbing trees, just put them all in a commas, different things, right?
yeah, okay, so hang on, let me just,
I don't, yeah,
logging, clear cutting,
comma, topping and limbing of trees.
commercial logging, uh, and clear cutting, 1, 2, 3, commercial logging, and topping and limbing of trees.
Tree cutting, clear cutting, commercial logging. I would just have all non-essential tree cutting, including clear cutting, commercial logging, comma, topping and limbing of trees in any parcel located within the scenic overlay district.
So you get rid of this and?
I think so.
Okay.
Any parcel is, how about all non-essential tree cutting, including clear cutting, commercial logging, topping and limbing of trees in any parcel located within the scenic overlay district, or commencing or engaging in tree removal modifications on any parcel in the scenic overlays prior to receiving a special use permit shall be punishable by a fine of up to. Don't you think that makes sense?
Well, I think that's fine.
Yeah, okay, commencing. I don't know why commencing's in capital letters, capital C, but
I don't know. I can make it a small c.
doesn't that make more sense? Okay. I'm just trying to read it through as a sentence to see if it's
Mhm.
all non-essential tree cutting, including clear cutting, commercial logging, topping and limbing of trees in any parcel located within the scenic overlay district, or commencing or engaging in tree removal / modification on any parcel in the scenic overlay district prior to receiving a special use permit I don't think you have to say to do so. I think special use permit shall be punishable by a fine of. I don't think we have to say to do so. You receive a special use permit, that's what it's for, is to do so. You don't need to say to do so.
Okay, so, well, let me just kind of reread it myself then. All on. Well, I would keep the to do so in there. I mean, it goes without saying, but you're being clear by saying it. I think you're being clear by saying it. So prior, yeah. So if you do these things before you got a special use permit to do so, you're gonna get a fine. So yeah, it should go
You
without
can leave
saying.
it in. I think it's redundant, but it's fine. I
It
mean,
is,
it's like you're getting a special use, you didn't receive a prior special use permit, so you can't do it.
well, you might have gotten a special use permit for something else. This is
Okay.
being clear that you gotta have a special permit to do this,
Okay.
not just special permit to do something else, and now you can do whatever you want with trees. You need to have a special permit for trees. So
Okay.
that's kind of what it clarifies, and it should go without saying, but you know, it's better to say it. I think it's better to
Okay,
say.
that's fine.
Okay.
And I would leave, I know they think $5,000 per day is like, ridiculous, but let's leave it. I mean, some court can reduce it.
But here's what they say. So
Mhm.
they say, well, we appreciate the fines up to $5,000 a day. We question the legality. We believe the town code currently sets a maximum of $300 per day. So I think that this is investigate. I think our answer to the planning board is we'll investigate this part of the town law, because they're saying the town law only goes up to 300 per day. So we ought to investigate the town law. So I think it makes sense to investigate the town law to make sure we're legal.
I do too, because for the short-term rentals, we made it higher than $300 a day. I think putting it in the zoning law um, gives it more teeth.
Yeah, okay. Well, because my answer to the planning board is we'll just investigate. I didn't change any words here, but my
Okay,
planning board is will investigate with the
sounds
town.
good. Yep.
Yeah, so, okay. So then they go on to say, and this is a whole nother document. This is I think that and I printed it off, and does it have page numbers? The Scenic Overlay District Handbook,
Mhm.
which I think is a 14-page document, but they didn't put page numbers on it. But anyway, so they're saying that, so this is interesting. We would like to see the Scenic Overlay Handbook updated. Well,
So would we.
what's that?
So would we.
Yeah. So it's interesting as so as they say they'd like to see the Scenic Overlay Handbook updated. What's interesting is they didn't say whose job it would be.
Right.
Is it, we're the zoning revision committee, Scenic Overlay Handbook isn't zoning law. So is it us? Maybe we should say, yeah, go for it. I tell them to go for it.
It does say right on the front of the handbook, it's the planning board. So I think that's great. They should do it. And they have a planner, they have the extra time. I don't think it's,
Right,
I
okay.
don't think that one is us.
Okay, so this would be a planning board to do. Planning,
Once this law is adopted, then it would make more sense to do it. So that's maybe what they're trying to say, but
okay.
I mean, it
Oh,
certainly is.
and then they want funding. So that's that's the thing is we would need to get them the funding. So maybe that's just their point, is that they would like to see it updated. They would like to get an expert in to do it, and they would need funding to do that. We would rely on consultants for expert advice. So they just need funding. So they're just asking for funding to do,
Right. I think they're also talking about generally speaking, with the law.
yeah.
Changing.
Right. But I think they're also saying they need funding.
Right.
So as we're looking at this now, I think that I agree with you that it would be a planning board to do, but they're saying they would need an expert to help them do it.
Mhm.
So, okay.
I think that would make sense for them to have an expert to help with it.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
it's gonna look a lot better, and secondly, they'll make sure that everything is, coordinated.
Yep.
It'll all be, they would all agree.
So I stopped sharing my screen.
I'm
And there
back.
you are again. Yay. So we're all good. So we got all the way through it. So I will document to the planning board our response, well, I'll document to our other ZRC members and see if they agree with what we did, because we're not a quorum. So and as I said partway through, I should have said at the beginning, but this is a zoning revision committee work session. We didn't have a quorum to have a meeting, and we're not making final decisions here, but the things that Jude and I worked on, I'll document, send it to the other members. And if they agree, if we have a quorum agreeing, then we'll send it kind of around to the planning board, the town board, and we'll do more things with it. But we just wanted to get the thought process going, which I think we did an excellent job. We'll pat both of us on the back.
We showed up and we did it.
We showed up and you got it. You got it. We showed up and we did it, trying to move the ball forward, and I think that's great. I think we had some really good discussions, so I think that we met our objective for the meeting.
We did. Awesome.
Yeah. So the big question is gonna be, what do we really address next? And by that, I mean, I know I want to get back to STRs. Um, we seem to be hitting some roadblocks, and I'm not quite sure the answer there, but we don't really need to discuss it kind of right here, right now. But in any event, and I don't know whether whether it's fruitful to discuss the housing law, and I'm not sure when we're going to resume those hearings. We had said that we were going to try to have the second town board meeting of every month, well, not counting May, but now we're back in June. So we had a session in April, and the thought was to keep having sessions, but we would need to know what part of the law we're looking at. And so we need to figure out where we are as a town board on that. So I don't know if it makes sense for the ZRC to look at that, so we can get back to STRs. And I need to get back to taking all the answers and continuing my spreadsheet of what, because I was tallying how much was each answer given of the comments. For each comment, how strongly was each comment shared, meaning how many respondents had a similar comment. So I still can continue that. So that's something I should probably look at for our next meeting, so we can talk a little more about STRs and what we see on that.
So we were kind of stuck in one place. You and I had kind of discussed it. And I
Yeah.
think maybe what we do is we just set that aside and we keep going with the rest of it. And,
Right.
and try to, and then, go back to but to keep making progress on the rest
Right.
of it. And then we go back and really try to sort that one out. But it just seems like we can't stall on that
Right. On
one
one thing.
thing,
Yeah.
because we might, when we get through it and we start progressing through it, it might give some clarity, and maybe we can come to a better solution.
Mhm.
So, I certainly, things are changing a little bit with the STRs, but I do think, we should get back to it. The one thing I wanted to mention to you is that, not necessarily for the ZRC, but certainly I would at some point would like to discuss with you the subdivision regs and the suggestions that I made.
Right. Okay. Oh, excellent.
I
Excellent.
was pretty specific about those, and just to
Yeah.
kind of get your read on them. And, but that could be something that we could look at, because
Mhm.
that was probably the least controversial
Offensive.
part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And, probably achievable with a
Right.
small document.
Right. Right. So,
Um, and then, it just, so I don't know I don't know what you want to do next. If you want to go back to STRs, if you want to tackle that. I mean, people have said to me, when are you guys going to do that? Well, because the STRs are complicated,
sure.
and I think, there are some parts of the subdivision regs that have some environmental protections that the town might want to move on.
Right. Right. Yeah. I
So,
agree.
and so, I don't know how you feel about that, but
Yeah.
that's something to consider.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me give it some thought. So let me first get this going, and we may wind up talking about this in 2 weeks, depending on whether we have agreement from the other two or where we are or whatever. So this may be our topic 2 weeks from now, but we'll see what we're ready to. If talking about subdivision is a smart thing to talk about next, or whether it's smarter if we're ready to get back to the STR, and like you say, let's continue the STR and see where we do agree, and then just set aside where we don't agree, and kind of try to reach as many agreements as we can, and then focus back on the disagreement areas.
I think we can do that. I think we can. I think there's more agreement than there is disagreement, and and I think it's also evolved from when we originally started talking about it. I think
Yeah.
we've into some other kinds of thoughts about it. And so, the other thing I wanted to do is I will send a note to Kai, because I had some very specific questions for him.
Hmm.
He never responded, so I will follow up with him.
Loop
I
back
think
around.
some of those are very difficult questions that nobody wants to answer.
Yeah.
Which is why I asked them.
Yeah. So, well, very, very interesting. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes back with. So,
Okay, so I think we're good.
okay.
Okay,
Well,
great.
excellent. Thank you so much
Okay.
for your time.
Yes, thank you, and you got to eat your dinner.
Not only that, but I left some for the cat and she was very happy.
I always have to feed my cats before these meetings, or they will be talking through the whole meeting.
Yeah, well, I had already fed them dinner, but if there's something that I have that they like, they get a little taste of what I had.
They're very
She
special.
was very happy to get a little taste of what I had.
Very nice.
So we're good. Well, as always, thank you tremendously.
Oh,
All
I'm
good.
glad we got something done. I'm pleased. All right. Thank you, Laura. Thanks for
Me
all
too.
your
Thank you.
move to adjourn.
I'm, well, it's not a real meeting, so, but I'll second it anyway.
Yes.
So
All
we're
right.
good.
Good night.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.